$2 hit the auctioneer's table, and the whole room turned to stare at the man who'd thrown them. It was all he had. Everyone in that hall knew it. Montana, October, 1873. 40 men with full pockets had come to buy themselves wives the way they bought mules. Find one, name a price, take it home. 5 women had already been sold. The 6th stood at the podium, and no one would touch her. She was too tall, too dark. Apache, somebody muttered and laughed. The auctioneer dropped the price. 100, 75, 50, 25. Each number falling into a silence that had stopped being cruel funny and turned into just cruel. Her knuckles went white. She kept her eyes on the floor. And from the back row, a man who couldn't afford to feed himself through pushed off the wall and started walking forward, through the turning heads, through the muttering, his hand already digging into his coat pocket. He set the coins down, $2. 40 heads turned. A flask hit the floor, and the woman looked up. Montana. October 1873, the auction hall smelled like coal smoke and bad decisions. Not an auction, not legally, just what everyone called it, the introductory ceremony for prospective matrimonial arrangements. That was the official name. Printed on a hand-lettered sign above the door, someone had underlined the word prospective twice, like that made any of it better. It didn't. Eli Graves stood in the back corner with his hat pulled low and his shoulders against the wall and $2 silver in his coat pocket. His last $2. The one supposed to buy enough cornmeal to last him through November. The one standing between him and a very specific kind of Montana. Winter desperation that he didn't like to think about directly. He wasn't here to bid. Couldn't bid. Had nothing to bid with. He was here because Cormac Espinosa had said, "Come into town with me. You've been alone out there too long. It'll do you good." And Eli had made the mistake of listening. Because sometimes a man got tired of his own company. Because 3 years of talking to 38 goats had started to feel less like farming and more like a slow surrender to something he couldn't name. So here he was. Watching the hall held maybe 40 men, ranchers mostly. A few merchants, the banker from Silver Creek who wore the same suit every day and somehow never seemed to wrinkle it. They stood around with their hats in their hands and their money in their pockets, and the restlessnesses of men who had decided to solve loneliness the same way they solved a livestock problem. Find one, pay for it, take it home. The first bride came out and the room leaned forward, young, blonde. Sauce, soft that had never broken a blister. She smiled the way people smile when they're terrified and trying not to show it. The kind of smile that costs something to hold. $300. The banker took her, looked satisfied about it too. The second, German woman, broad-shouldered, eyes that said she understood work and wasn't afraid of it, $250. The blacksmith from the north end of the valley, the third. The fourth, the fifth. Gone. Gone. Each one claimed. Each one standing at that makeshift podium while the auctioneer, a red-faced man named Prentice, who had already started on his second flask, called out numbers and the room called back. The whole thing dressed up in the language of ceremony and introduction and prospective matrimonial arrangements. But everyone in the room knew exactly what it was. Ely watched from his corner, felt the 2 coins in his pocket, told himself he was just here to get out of the cabin, told himself he'd leave after this next one. Then came the 6th. She didn't walk like the others. The others had walked like women trying to take up less space. Shoulders inward, eyes down. The practiced smallness of people who had learned that smallness was safer. This woman walked like she was heading to her own execution, and had decided to meet it standing straight. Tall God, so tall. She had to bend slightly to clear the door frame, had to, because she was 6'3" at least. Maybe more. And the door frame wasn't built for her. Nothing in this room was built for her. The dress wasn't built for her either. Too short in the sleeves, too tight across the shoulders, straining at the seams like it had been made for someone half her size and twice her delicacy. Her hair was dark as creek water at night, pulled back so tight it made her face look severe, angular, uncompromising. Her hands humbled. Her hands, they hung at pads, and they were the hands of someone who had worked, really worked. Not the soft hands of the woman before her. These were hands with history in them. Knuckles that had met resistance and kept going. He could see that clearly. High cheekbones, the particular bronze of her skin in the lantern light. The way she carried herself, even now, even in this. Like someone who came from people who did not apologize for existing. She kept her eyes on the floor, didn't look up, didn't look at the room, didn't look at any of the 40 men who had gone very suddenly quiet. And then the laughter started, not all at once. It built, the way a fire builds, one spark, then two, then suddenly, the whole thing going, and there's no putting it out. Someone snorted first. Then someone else said, something Eli couldn't catch, but the men around him could, and they laughed. Then the man next to Eli, rancher from the East Valley, name Eli could never remember, shook his head and said quietly, not even to anyone in particular, hell of a thing. Prentice up front was already sweating through his collar. Gentlemen, this here is our final, our last candidate for this evening's introductory proceedings. She has traveled a considerable distance, and she is. Well, he cleared his throat. Let's start the bidding at $100. Silence. Complete and immediate and total silence. Someone coughed. Someone's boot scraped the floor. The clock on the wall ticked 4 times. 5, 6, 75. Prentice tried. His voice had lost its showman quality entirely. He sounded like a man trying to sell something he already knew nobody wanted. She's educated, reads and writes. That's worth something, gentlemen. Nothing. 50, he said. Still nothing. The woman on the platform. She hadn't moved, hadn't flinched at the laughter, hadn't looked up at the silence. But Eli watched her hands. Her hands had been loose at her sides when she walked in. Now they were clasped in front of her, knuckles going pale. Not shaking, not yet, but held together, with the grip of someone using the act of holding on to stay standing. He knew that grip had held his own hands that way in a wheat field in Pennsylvania in July of 1863. While the smoke cleared, while he looked for men who weren't there anymore. 25, Prentice said. Almost a whisper now. The room had gone uncomfortable. This wasn't entertaining anymore. Even the men who'd laughed had gone quiet. There's a kind of a silence that falls when cruelty stops being funny and just becomes cruelty. The room had reached that silence, but nobody bid, nobody moved, because nobody wanted her. Eli's fingers found the 2 silver dollars in his pocket, closed around them. Cold and flat and heavy, he turned them over. Once, twice, the woman on the platform. She raised her eyes, just for a second, just one sweep of the room. The look of someone checking to confirm what they already knew. Dark eyes. He was too far back to see them clearly, but he could see the steadiness in them. The terrible steadiness of a person who has decided that dignity costs too much and is trying to figure out what's left when you let it go. But she hadn't let it go yet. She was still standing, after everything, after the laughter and the silence and Prentice, sweating through his collar, and 40 men who couldn't be bothered. She was still standing going once. Eli's hand moved, not a decision exactly. More like his body made the choice before his brain had finished the argument. The argument being, these are your last $2. You need these to survive. You are one bad week away from real trouble and spending your last money on what? On a stranger? On impulse? On the way her knuckles had gone white, and she was still, standing going twice, his mouth opened. $2, the words came out clean and clear, and much louder than he intended. 40 heads turned. Prentice's mouth fell open. Someone's flask slipped and hit the floor, and the woman on the platform. The tall woman with the white knuckles and the dark eyes and the dress that didn't fit. She looked straight at him, across the whole length of the hall, through the turning heads and the starting murmur, and the man next to Eli, who had just inhaled his own spit laughing. She looked at him, and Eli looked back, and he thought, I have no idea what I just did. Then the room found its voice again, and it was not a kind voice. $2. Did he say two? Graves has finally lost his. Can't even buy a lame mule for $2 in this. Mountain man found his mountain woman. Ha! He ignored them, all of them. He was looking at the woman, and she was looking at him, and her expression was doing something complicated that he didn't have the vocabulary for yet. Not gratitude, not relief. Something more guarded than that. Something that wanted to be hope, but was too tired to commit to it. Prentice had collected himself enough to sputter. Now see here, Graves. This is a human woman we're discussing. Not a $2 is my bid, Eli said, steadier than he felt. Is that enough to meet your reserve, or do I need to find 2 bits more? Prentice looked at the room, at the woman, at his empty ledger. Looked like a man doing arithmetic on a problem with no good answer. He scanned the crowd one last time. Anyone? Any bid at all? $3? $2.50. Anyone? The silence that answered was its own kind of answer. Sold, Prentice said, quietly, like he was apologizing for something, to Eli Graves. $2, he paused. God help you both. Eli walked forward through the parting crowd. He was aware of the eyes, the whispers, the amusement that men have when they watch another man do something they consider foolish. He'd been the subject of that amusement before. After Gettysburg, after Adeline left. After the bank meeting 2 years ago where he'd asked for a loan extension, and the banker had looked at him with that combination of pity and contempt that wealthy men reserve for men who are trying very hard. He was used to it. He set the 2 silver dollars on Prentice's table. His last $2. Gone, just like that. Leaving him with exactly nothing between himself and whatever Montana had planned for him next. Up close, she was even taller than she'd seemed on the platform. He wasn't a small man. 5'11", 170 pounds of mostly work and weather. And she nearly met him at eye level, nearly. Dark eyes, brown, with something amber in them, when the lantern light caught right. A jaw set like she'd decided something, and wasn't taking questions about it. She looked at him the way you look at a trap you can't quite identify. Ma'am, he said. Touched the brim of his hat, she said nothing. Kept looking, Mr. Graves. Prentice was pushing papers across the table. You'll need to sign here and… I can read, Eli said shortly. He scanned the document. Marriage contract. Binding under territorial law. The language was dressed up in formality, but underneath it said what it said. He felt his stomach turn at some of the phrasing. Granting, like she was property to be transferred. He signed anyway. Then held out the pen. She looked at it for a moment. Not moving, you don't have to, he said quietly. If you'd rather take your chances elsewhere, I won't hold you to any of this. You walk out that door right now, and we'll call it nothing. She looked at him, really looked. Like she was checking the math on something. Elsewhere, she said. Her voice was low. Careful. The voice of someone who had learned to use words economically. Yes. All my other options. She took the pen. Her hand was steady when she signed. Neat letters, each one deliberate. Kaya. Then after a pause, just a breath of a pause, she added Graves. Just like that, she was his wife. The crowd had mostly lost interest. Already moving toward the door. He heard the comments anyway. Caught them at the edges. Fool. Won't last the winter. Can you imagine what she eats? He didn't look at any of them. He looked at Kaya. Where are your things? She gestured toward the corner. A single trunk. Dark wood, brass fittings going green. Small enough that he lifted it with one hand. Light enough that he was immediately aware of what that meant. Everything she owned. Everything she'd brought across, however many miles. In one small trunk, my wagon's outside, he said. She followed him without a word. Montana afternoon hit them like something physical. October. Light, low and gold and severe. The kind of light that makes everything look like a last thing. Last color before the gray came in and stayed. His wagon was exactly what a man with $2 had. a collection of wood and wheels that had seen better years and was currently having opinions about the axle on the left rear. His mule, Bess, stood in the traces with the philosophical patience of an animal that had long since given up expecting anything good. He helped Kaya up onto the seat. She was heavier than her thinness suggested. There was real weight in her frame, real bone and muscle, but she was also lighter than she looked in another way. In the way that people are light when they've been hungry long enough. He knew that lightness. Had worn it himself. She arranged herself on the seat with careful precision, folded her hands in her lap, looked straight ahead at nothing. Ely climbed up beside her, picked up the reins before he could signal Bess forward. A horse cut, not a horse. A stallion, black, expensive. The kind of horse that costs more than Eli's annual income and knows it. The man riding it was Warren Holt, 55 years old. Built like a man who had always had enough to eat and enough men to do his lifting. His suit was dusty from the road, but still marked him as what he was. The largest landowner in 3 counties, and a man who had not, in Eli's age, ever done anything without a reason that served himself. His smile was the kind that had been practiced in mirrors. "Graves," he said pleasantly. "Heard you made quite a purchase in there." Ely's jaw tightened. "Holt, $2. Holt shook his head with the expression of a man who finds something charming in its stupidity. "Have to admire the economy. Was there something you needed?" "Just a reminder. Your lease payment. 90 days from today." 6. Holt's eyes moved to Kaya, moved over her the way a man looks at livestock deciding, isn't worth his time. "Though I suppose your circumstances have changed. What with spending your reserves on?" He paused. "Let the pause do the work. This." Ely felt his hands tighten on the reins. Bess shifted and snorted. Beside him, he heard Kaya take one careful, controlled breath. Just one. She didn't speak, didn't move. Didn't give Holt the satisfaction of a reaction. "I'll have your money," Eli said. "I'm sure you believe that." Holt's smile didn't change. "Winter's coming, Graves. Man alone can't make it through a Montana winter with a failing ranch. Man with," another look at Kaya, "dependence makes it even harder." He reached into his coat, produced an envelope, $500, cash, for the land. Today, he held it out. "You could go somewhere easier. Somewhere that doesn't kill men for trying." Ellie looked at the envelope. "Didn't take it." "No." Holt held it a moment longer, then put it back. "Think about it," he said. "The offer has a shelf life." He tipped his hat. The exaggerated courtesy of a man who doesn't need to be rude because he's already won. Then he turned his stallion and rode off down the main street. Easy, unhurried. Like a man with nowhere to be because everywhere was already his. Silence. "Then, friend of yours?" Ali looked at Kaya, who was watching Holt's retreating back with an expression he couldn't read. Calm, assessing. The way you look at a problem you're already calculating how to solve. "Wouldn't say that," he said. "What does he want with the land?" "Timber. Old-growth pine on the north slope. Worth a lot more than $600 once it's cut." She was quiet for a moment. "So he wants you to fail." "He's been helping me fail for 2 years. He'd say that's different." She turned and looked at him directly. "Is the forge on your property?" He blinked. Of all the things he'd expected her to ask, "There's an old smithy. Been abandoned. Previous owner was, can we get there before dark?" "If we move now." She faced forward again. Done with the conversation. Done with Holt. Already somewhere else in her head. He clicked his tongue at Bess, and the old mule started forward. They rode mostly in silence. Eli was aware of her beside him in a way he hadn't expected. Not uncomfortable, exactly. Just present. She occupied space differently than most people. Sat still without fidgeting. Watched the landscape as it changed from town to open grass to the low hills that held his land. Not watching like a tourist. Like a person reading something. "How many goats?" She said after a while. 38. Was 42 last month but lost 4 to wolves. 38 is subsistence level. I know. The cabin. 2 rooms. Keeps the weather out, he paused. Mostly, she might have smiled at that. Hard to tell. The light was going and her face was in shadow. Wide-shawled. Why did you bid? She asked. He'd known this was coming, had been trying to figure out how to answer it since the moment he'd opened his mouth in that hall. He could say something reasonable, something that sounded like calculation or charity or Christian duty. He didn't. You were still standing, he said. After all of it. You hadn't gone anywhere. She absorbed that standing was all I had left. I know the feeling. Something passed between them then. Not warmth, not yet. Just recognition. The understanding of two people who have been worn down to something essential and can see that quality in each other. What happened to make you this way? She asked. The ranch. The debt. He almost deflected. Instead, my wife left 3 years ago, took what she could carry and went to Silver Creek with a man who owned things. She was right to go. I couldn't give her what she needed. And what did she need? A future that wasn't a question mark. Kaya looked out at the land. I am sorry, she said. Simple. Not performative. Don't be. She was honest about what she wanted. I just couldn't provide it, and now you have me, Kaya said. Dry as the October grass. A woman you bought for $2. Who eats? Apparently, he almost choked. Holt said that. Not me. I heard what Holt said. I didn't. I wasn't. Graves, Eli. She tested the word. First time she'd used his name. I'm not offended. I'm very large. I do eat. These are facts. He didn't know what to say to that. He said nothing. And after a moment he laughed. Brief and rusty, like something that hadn't been used in a while. And she didn't laugh exactly, but there was something in her profile that was different. Something that was almost, Bess hit a rut soot, and the wagon lurched, and the moment scattered. But it had been there. The ranch came into view as the sun hit the mountains. He watched her see it, the cabin hunched against the hillside, log walls gone gray, one shutter hanging crooked, roof patched in 3 places with mismatched wood, the goat pen with its rotting posts and the fence wire that kept meaning to be fixed, the barn that leaned left like it was listening for something in the ground, and there, beside the barn, half hidden by weeds and shadow, the old smithy, stone walls, collapsed chimney, rusted equipment visible through the open doorway, he said. This is it. I know it's not. It has walls, she said, and a roof. She was looking at the smithy, not at the cabin, not at the goat pen or the leaning barn, or any of the evidence of a life slowly coming apart. She was looking at the smithy with something in her face that he hadn't seen before, not evaluation. Something older than that. Something that looked almost like recognition. He pulled Bess to a stop, climbed down, reached up for Kaya, old habit, not thinking, and she looked at his offered hand for one moment before placing her own on his shoulders and letting herself down. When did you last eat? He asked. He could see the hollows in her face now. The way the skin sat too close to the bone, she had to think about it. That was his answer. Come inside, he said. Food first. The interior of the cabin was what it was. One main room, stone fireplace, rough table, 2 chairs, the bedroom door standing open, showing the narrow bed with the patchwork quilt. His mother had sent west with him, 14 years ago, when he'd had different ideas about what his life was going to look like. Kaya stood in the middle of the room, took it in with those measuring eyes. The bedroom is yours, Eli said. Set her trunk down. I'll sleep out here, she turned sharply. This is your home, and he stopped. Started again. You should have the bed. I don't need, Kaya. She went quiet. I'm not asking anything of you, he said. Tonight or any night. That's not what this is. I don't know yet what this is. But it's not that. She studied him. The trap-checking look. Trying to find the catch. What is it then? She said. 2 people in a bad situation trying to figure out if they can make it less bad. That's an honest answer. I'm not much good at the other kind. She looked at him for another long moment. Then she moved to the fireplace. Not sitting, not settling, just standing near the heat, her back to him, looking into the unlit hearth. My father taught me to build fires before he taught me anything else, she said. Quiet. Not to him exactly. To the room, he said. A man who can build a fire can survive anything. Can make heat, can make light, can make tools. She touched the stone of the fireplace. He was a blacksmith. Apache. He learned from a man in Kansas, a white man who didn't care what he was as long as he worked hard. He worked hard. She stopped. He's gone, Eli said, not asking. 3 years ago, she turned to face him. Something had closed in her expression. The window that had been open briefly was shut. I'll take the bedroom, one night. Tomorrow we'll discuss arrangements. That's fair. He built the fire. Heated beans and salt pork. Nothing fancy, but it was hot and there was enough of it. They ate at the rough table, in the silence of strangers who have been thrown together by circumstance and are still learning the shape of each other. She ate carefully. Someone who had been hungry before and hadn't forgotten it. When she was done, she looked like herself again, color in her face. Some of the hollow gone. She stood, mist grave. Lightly, she shook her head slightly, as if correcting herself. Thank you. For the $2. Before he could answer, she went into the bedroom and closed the door. He sat at the table for a while, listening to the small sounds of her on the other side of the door. Fabric, the creak of the bed, the long exhale of someone who has been holding themselves together all day and has finally found somewhere to let go. He sat with the empty plates and the dying fire and the knowledge that he had $2 less than nothing, and a failing ranch, and a landlord who wanted him gone in 90 days to figure out an impossible problem. He also had, for the first time in 3 years, another heartbeat in the cabin. He wasn't sure what to do with that. Morning came gray and cold. He was up before her, built the fire, put coffee on, sliced bacon into the pan. Familiar motions. Steadying. He heard her moving before the door opened. Heard the heaviness of her step, not clumsy, just solid, like a person who had given up, trying to be small and just moved through the world at their actual size. She came out with her hair loose, still wearing yesterday's dress. She looked at the pan, at the coffee, at him. I should be doing that, she said. Why? Because that's... She stopped. That's what? She pressed her lips together, recalibrating. I don't know what I expected, she said. Not an apology. An observation. Sit down, he said. Coffee's ready. She sat, wrapped both hands around the cup like it was keeping her tethered to something. I need to understand the situation, she said. The real situation. Not the version you'd tell a stranger. You are a stranger. I am also your wife. A beat. Tell me. So he told her all of it. The land that wasn't technically his, homestead rights. 8 years of working ground he didn't own. The original deed purchased by Holt from a widow named Agnes Crane, who may or may not have had the right to sell it. The lease Holt claimed Eli owed. The $600. The 90 days. The timber on the north slope, old-growth pine, stands of it, the kind that California was paying premium prices for the goats. 38 of them, barely covering basics. She listened without interrupting. That same focused attention she'd turned on the smithy yesterday. When he finished, she stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the yard. At the smithy, the forge, she said. How long has it been unused? Since before I was here. Previous owner was a blacksmith, man named Aldous Peck. Died 7-8 years ago. Equipment's been sitting since. She kept looking. My father's name was Thomas Runningwater, she said. He was Apache. He learned blacksmithing in Kansas from a man who cared more about skill than blood. He taught me from the time I was 9 years old. She turned, looked at Eli directly. Picks, shovels, hammers, nails, horseshoes. The mining camp at Silver Creek, 20 miles north. You know it? Everyone knows it. They are growing fast. Hundreds of men. Equipment breaks constantly. Wears out constantly. There is no good blacksmith close enough to serve them well. She crossed her arms. I can be that blacksmith. He looked at her. This woman he'd bought for $2, who had arrived with nothing and was now, you think you can make $600 in 90 days? I don't know. But sitting here doing nothing guarantees we lose. This way we have a chance. We'd need money to restart the forge. $40–50 for materials, coal, new bellows, replacement tools. Then we get that money. From where? I have nothing. From the people who also want to see Holt lose. She said it simply. Like it was obvious. Like, of course, there were people in this valley who had their own reasons to want Warren Holt beaten. And of course, those people might be willing to put a little money toward watching it happen. And the thing was, she wasn't wrong. Cormac Espinosa, Eli said slowly. He lost 20 acres to Holt 2 years ago. That's a start, Ren Whitehorse. Silas Pruitt, ask them. He looked at her for a long moment. This stranger, this woman with the precise hands and the measuring eyes and the father who had taught her to build fires and make things from nothing. Why, he said. You could leave. Walk into town and find work. You don't owe me anything. She was quiet, really quiet. The kind of quiet that means something is being decided. You looked at me, she said finally. In that room. When everyone else was deciding what I was worth and finding the number very small. Pause. You looked at me like the number didn't matter. He didn't have an answer for that. Show me the forge, she said. They walked out into the cold October morning. The smithy was worse up close than it looked from a distance. Stone walls solid enough, but the interior was a disaster of years. The old bellows had rotted completely, just a collapsed pile of leather, and wood that crumbled when she touched it. The anvil was buried under rust, but when Kaya ran her hands over it, feeling the surface, her face changed. Solid, she said. Under all this. Good iron. She moved through the wreckage like she was reading a language he didn't speak, picking things up, setting them down, calculating something he couldn't follow. He just watched her, this woman who had been for sale yesterday morning, who had stood on a platform in a dress that didn't fit and held herself together with white knuckles, while 40 men decided she wasn't worth even $25, who was now standing in his ruined smithy, touching a rusted anvil like it was an old friend. $40, she said. Maybe 45. For materials, I'll ride to Cormac today. She looked at him.
One of those direct looks that went all the way through. You spent your last money on me,
she said. Yes, you didn't know I could do this. No, then why? He'd already told her once. In the wagon. But he said it again, because it was still true and maybe it needed saying more than once. You were still standing. She was quiet for a moment. Then she turned back to the forge. 2 weeks, she said. Give me the materials in 2 weeks, and then I'll show you what $2 bought you. He rode to Cormac's place that afternoon. The older man listened, didn't ask many questions, just listened with the patience of someone who had already made up his mind before you finished talking. $20, Cormac said when Eli was done. Counted it out from a coffee tin on his shelf. Slow and deliberate, no interest. He paused, just beat the man. Ely rode to Ren Whitehorse next. She lived 3 miles east with her 2 youngest sons, running a small spread on her own since her husband had died 2 winters back. She heard him out sitting in her doorway, arms folded, wind moving through the sage behind her. 15, she said, and I want to meet her, Silas Pruitt. 60 years old and bitter in the way of a man who had been optimistic once and paid for it. He'd lost the better part of his land to Holt's lawyers 18 months ago and now worked a fraction of what had been his. He listened to Eli without expression. Then he reached into his coat and produced 10 folded bills. It's all I've got, he said. Take it. $45, more than enough. Eli rode home in the dark with the money, in his coat pocket, and the Montana stars overhead, and something moving in his chest that he was trying very hard not to name prematurely. Kaya spent the next 13 days in the smithy. He helped where she let him, carried stone for the chimney repair, hauled the new bellows from town, held things while she fitted them, learned to stay out of her way when she was working through a problem in her head, which he could tell because her jaw went a certain way and her eyes went somewhere internal. He found himself noticing too many things. The way she moved when she was certain, no wasted motion, every action landing exactly where she intended. The way she went quiet when she was working something out. The way she talked to the metal, low and matter-of-fact, like she was negotiating with it rather than forcing it. The way she thanked him every time he did something small. Not elaborately. Just, "Thank you, Eli." Like it meant something to say the name. He noticed too many things. He told himself to stop. He mostly did not stop. On the morning of the 14th day, before first light, he heard her outside. He went to the window. She was standing in front of the smithy with a lamp, looking at the rebuilt chimney, the rehung door, the cleaned and oiled equipment visible through the opening, just standing there. He pulled on his coat and went out. She didn't look at him when he came to stand beside her. Both of them looking at the smithy in the cold dark. "It's ready," she said. "Then let's light it." She went inside. He followed. She built the fire the way her father had taught her. Small and certain, working up from nothing, fed the coal. Worked the new bellows with a rhythm that was already muscle memory, already in her body like breathing. The heat built. He could feel it from 3 feet away. She picked up a piece of iron stock from the pile they'd bought in town. Set it in the coal weighted. The iron glowed orange. Then red-orange. Then the red that meant it was ready. She pulled it out, set it on the anvil. Raised the hammer, brought it down. The sound rang across the whole valley. Rang off the hills. Rang into the morning dark and kept going. The way sounds do in cold air. Traveling farther than they should. Again. Again, each strike deliberate, precise. Not force for force's sake, but force with intent. Shaping, moving, persuading the iron into the form she wanted. She was making a horseshoe. Simple, basic. Eli stood in the doorway of the smithy and watched and felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Not hope exactly. Something bigger than hope. Scarier than hope. The kind of feeling that comes when you realize something real is happening, and you're not sure you're ready for it. She finished the shoe in 20 minutes, plunged it into the water bucket. Steam hissed up. She lifted it and held it to the lamp. Perfect. She looked at him. "Well, how soon can you make 20?" he asked. Something crossed her face. She wasn't a woman who smiled easily or often. He'd noticed that, had been cataloging the rare occasions. But there was something there now. Something close. "By end of week," she said. He nodded. Looked at the horseshoe in her hand. Then at the smithy around them, rebuilt, functional, warm with the fire they'd lit together in the dark. Then at her. "Holt has no idea," he said quietly. "No," she agreed. "He doesn't." She turned back to the forge, picked up another piece of iron, set it in the coal. Outside, the Montana morning was coming in gray over the hills. Cold and honest and offering nothing easy. Inside the smithy, the fire burned, and Eli Graves, who had spent his last $2 on faith, stood in the doorway of something he didn't have a name for yet, and watched the woman who was his wife, by law, by accident, by $2 and one unplanned moment of decency, work the iron with steady hands. He stayed. He didn't know what came next, but he stayed. Week 3, the money jar on the kitchen table had $150 in it. Ellie counted it every morning. Not because he didn't trust the count, because counting it was the only thing that felt real some days. The coins and the bills stacked there in the gray morning light, while Coffee-Headed and Kaya was already in the smithy. And the sound of the bellows came through the cabin walls like a second heartbeat. The house had grown. $150, $450 to go, 67 days left. He did the math, kept doing the math. The way a man prods a sore tooth with his tongue, knowing it'll hurt, doing it anyway. $8 a day, every day. No breaks, no disasters, no bad luck. Just $8 a day for 67 more days, and they'd make it. Just. He put the lid back on the jar and went to help with the morning goats, and tried not to think about everything that could go wrong between now and then. There was a lot that could go wrong. The forge ran from before dawn until after dark. Kaya had a rhythm. He'd learned it without being taught. She came in early, always before him, always already working when he got there, and she moved through the day in phases. Morning was production, steady and fast. Horseshoes, nails, simple things that Silver Creek needed in bulk and paid reliably for. Afternoon was specialty work, picks with reinforced heads. Shovels with the blade angle she'd worked out herself over 2 days of adjustments and silence. Hammer handles fitted with the grip that didn't blister. The mining camp was 20 miles north. Cormac's nephew made the run twice a week with a wagon. Came back with cash and a growing list of new orders. Word was spreading. The forge at the Graves place. Good work. Fast work. Reasonable prices. The kind of work that didn't break on the second use. Silver Creek had 300 men in it. 300 men working hard ground, with tools that wore out and broke and needed replacing. And now there was a blacksmith close enough to matter. They were averaging $9 a day by the end of week 2. 9. Ellie did the math again, felt something almost dangerous in it. He went to help Kaya move iron stock and said nothing about it, because saying it out loud felt like tempting something. Holt made his first move on day 22, sipped clean. The way Holt always worked. Nothing you could point to directly, nothing that left marks. The coal supplier in town sent word, couldn't fill their order anymore. Sorry. Previous commitments, no hard feelings. Ellie rode in, spoke to the man. Got the same story with the same careful eyes that wouldn't quite meet his. Holt, Eli said. The man said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. 20 miles in the other direction was another supplier. Charge double, fine. They'd pay double. They'd find a way to make double work. Eli rode the 20 miles, made the deal. Came back with the coal and a headache, and the tired anger of a man who is fighting on 2 fronts and knows it. Kaya was working when he got back. Didn't look up. Holt, she said. Holt, she nodded. Kept working. Like she'd already expected it and had already decided it didn't matter. He stood in the smithy doorway watching her. Soot on her face. Hair tied back with a leather cord. Arms moving the bellows with that steady rhythm that never seemed to get tired. He realized he'd been standing there longer than was strictly necessary. He went to unload the coal. Day 28. The hammer. Kaya's main hammer, the one she'd bought in town with the first $45. The one she'd spent 2 days getting the weight and balance right on. The handle cracked mid-swing. Not an accident. Or, it looked like an accident. Looked like old wood. Looked like bad luck. Except Eli had checked that handle 3 days ago. Had run his hands along the grain. Had found nothing. Kaya stood in the smithy holding the broken halves. Looked at the fracture for a long time. The cut was too clean. Too deliberate. Hidden inside the wood where you wouldn't see it from outside. You'd only find it when it snapped under pressure. 2 days, she said quietly. Minimum. To find a replacement and fit it right. 2 days of production gone. They looked at each other. Who had access, she said. Anyone. I don't lock the smithy. Lock it. He started to say something about trust, about the community they were building, about how locking the door would send the wrong. Her look stopped him. He locked the smithy. The 2 days cost them. Not just the production, the momentum, the rhythm they'd built, the machine of it. Kaya used the time to sharpen and repair other tools, to plan, to work through problems in her head that she'd been too busy to address. But the money jar didn't grow, and the deadline didn't pause. They made it up by end of week 4. Barely. Kept going. Doyle Kane came on day 30. Evening. Eli was feeding the goats. Kaya had finally shut down the forge for the night and was washing her hands at the pump. Doyle rode in slow, looking over his shoulder twice before he dismounted. Eli had seen him before, knew the type. Mid-40s, worn down, the look of a man who had made bad choices and knew it and kept making them. Because the alternative required courage he wasn't sure he had. Mr. Graves, he said. I need to talk to you and your wife. They gathered in the barn. Away from windows, Doyle talked fast, nervous. The words coming in bursts like he'd rehearsed, and then forgotten and was improvising now. He worked for Holt. had been reporting on Eli's progress for 6 months. The forge production. The money. How close they were getting. Eli felt his jaw tighten. Why are you telling me this? Because my wife is sick. Doyle's voice broke on the word. Recovered. Lung fever. Bad. Holt promised me medicine. Real medicine from the doctor in Silver Creek. I kept feeding him information, and he kept promising he stopped. He gave me colored water, Doyle said. Charged me for it. Told me it was imported. It was water with something blue in it. Silence in the barn. Kaya was looking at Doyle with that measuring look. Not sympathy yet. Not condemnation. Just assessment. How sick, she said. Bad. She can barely sit up. Where? 3 miles east. Our place, Kaya looked at Eli. One look. He nodded. I know plant medicine, she said to Doyle. Not a doctor, but what grows here? I know it. I'll go see her. Doyle stared at her. Why would you? Because Holt lied to you about the medicine, she said. That doesn't make you Holt, she turned to Eli. He's been reporting everything. Holt knows our exact numbers. Ellie looked at Doyle. What does he know? Everything. How much money you've made. The forge rebuild. Who's helping you? Doyle reached into his coat. Pulled out folded paper. He's planning something. I don't know what. But he had his lawyer in twice this week, and he stopped talking when I came. In the room, Ely took the papers, looked at Cormac's name, at the list of neighbors who'd contributed, at the production numbers, accurate to within $10. He's been counting. Eli said, he knows you're close. And he's not going to just let you make the payment. Kaya was already moving toward the door. Take me to your wife, she said. Wren Whitehorse arrived the next morning. Ely hadn't sent for her. She came because she heard. The way information moved through the valley, not by telegraph, but by the older wire of people who watched and talked and knew. She stood in the yard with her arms folded and looked at Eli. Holt's going to try a legal move, she said. My cousin works at the land office. Says there's been questions about homestead claims in this area. Someone's been pulling records. Holt's lawyer, Eli said. Probably. Can he find anything? Wren looked at him steadily. That depends on what's in those records, she said. Doesn't it? He didn't have an answer for that, because he didn't know what was in those records. He'd been squatting legally, or semi-legally, for 8 years on land he'd homesteaded under territorial law, from a deed that Holt claimed to have purchased from Agnes Crane, who had sold it as if it was hers to sell. Whether it had been hers to sell, that was the question he'd been trying not to look at directly. The barn raising happened on day 40, Kaya's idea. Eli had thought it was too much, too visible, too much time away from production. That's exactly why we do it, she'd said. Holt wants us isolated. Wants everyone in this valley to think we're failing. We show them we're not. She was right. She was usually right, which was something he was still getting used to. 50 people came. More than Eli had expected. More than he'd dared to hope. Families from across the valley. Ranchers. Farmers. A few people from town who'd heard and wanted to be part of something that was about more than just a forge. They tore down the old smithy walls to the foundation, rebuilt in a single day. Stone and mortar this time. Proper. A chimney built right. Reinforced doorframe, wide enough for Kaya to move through without adjusting. A roof with real pitch. Wren's sons worked alongside Cormac's nephews. Silas Pruitt, bitter and banged up and 60 years old, swung a hammer for 7 hours without stopping once. Doyle Kane showed up mid-morning and took the job nobody wanted. Hauling mortar, backbreaking and endless, and did it without complaint. His wife was improving. Wren's plant medicine. 2 days in, the woman had sat up, eaten soup. That was enough for Doyle. By evening, the new forge stood not just functional, solid, kind of structure that said we are staying. Not we hope to stay. Not we are trying. We are staying. They ate together after. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else had brought whiskey and was willing to share. The fire burned outside and people sat in circles. And the valley felt, for that one evening, like it was on their side. Eli danced with Kaya. He hadn't planned to. It happened the way things kept happening around her. without plan, without decision, as if the choice had been made somewhere below the level of thought and was presenting itself as already done. She was taller than him, an inch and a half, maybe two. She'd been aware of it all evening. He'd noticed her adjusting, minimizing, old habit. The habit of a tall woman who had learned early that her size made people uncomfortable. He put one hand on her back and held out the other and looked up, just slightly, and said nothing. She looked at him. Then she stood straight, her full height, stopped minimizing, stopped adjusting, just stood there at her real size and took his hand. They danced badly. He hadn't danced since. He couldn't remember since when. She was graceful in the forge but had no experience with this. They were equally terrible and they both knew it, and the music was enthusiastic if not precise, and none of that mattered. "You're stepping on my feet," she said. "You have very large feet," he said. "Hard to miss them." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "That is true. In my defense, there is no defense. I haven't danced in. Neither have I." "Then we're equally terrible." "Yes," she said, "we are," but she didn't stop dancing. And he noticed, in the way he kept noticing things about her, that she was smiling. A real one. Not the careful half-expression she used when something mildly pleased her. A real smile. It changed her whole face completely. He thought, "I want to make her look like that again." "That is a dangerous thought, Eli Graves." Then he stepped on her foot again. "Graves, Eli, 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 very patient. Stop looking at my face and watch your feet." He looked at his feet. He was still smiling when the song ended. Day 4. Theodore Vance rode up to the ranch on a good horse with a good coat and a leather briefcase that cost more than Eli's wagon. Smooth. 50 years old. The practiced manner of a man whose entire career was making propositions sound reasonable. He introduced himself pleasantly and said he'd heard about the forge operation and was interested in a business arrangement. He produced a contract. Eli read it standing in the yard. Kaya came from the smithy. She'd seen the visitor from the chimney, probably. She stood beside Eli and read over his shoulder. $800 a month. Exclusive supply contract for mining equipment. 200 items per month. First payment on delivery of 50 items within 2 weeks. $800 a month. Eli did not look at Kaya. Did not let his face do what it wanted to do. "Give us the evening to review," he said. Vance smiled agreeably. "Of course. I'll be at the hotel in town, but the offer expires at noon tomorrow." He rode off. Eli stood in the yard with the contract. $800 a month. More than enough to pay Holt. More than enough to rebuild. More than enough to do things he hadn't let himself think about. Like a real house. Like more livestock. Like the future that had stopped feeling possible 3 years ago when Adeline walked out with her bag packed and her mind made up. He looked at Kaya. She was already reading the contract again. 3rd time. Her eyes moving slow and deliberate over each line. He watched her face. "Section 7, she said. "What about it?" "Subsection C, he found it. Read it. In the event of non-delivery of contracted items. Buyer reserves the right to claim materials and equipment at some compensation for breach of contract." He read it again. Materials and equipment. He looked at Kaya. "That's vague," he said. "Intentionally. Could mean the smithy tools. Could mean the forge," she said. "Could mean the barn. Could mean the land." She folded the contract. Handed it back to him. "If we miss one delivery," she said. 1. Equipment failure. Supply shortage. Illness. Anything. Holt takes everything. Holt sent him. Holt sent him." They stood in the yard in the late afternoon light. The money jar on the kitchen table. $250 in it now. The forge warm behind them, ticking as the metal cooled for the evening. $800 a month. "We could modify the terms," Eli said. "Strike that clause. Offer different. He won't accept. He needs that clause." Kaya's voice was flat, not angry, just certain. "This is not a business deal. This is a better trap." Ellie looked at the contract in his hand. He'd been poor a long time. He knew what this felt like. The cruelty of having exactly what you need, put close enough to touch, and made just wrong enough to ruin you. We refuse, he said. Yes, and then Holt knows we found the clause. He already knows we're not stupid. This just confirms it. Ellie folded the contract. All right, he rode to town the next morning, found Vance at the hotel over breakfast, set the contract on the table unsigned. The terms don't work, Eli said. Vance looked at the contract, then at Eli. His pleasant expression held for one more second before it didn't. Section 7, Vance said. Subsection C, a long pause. You're making a difficult situation harder, Vance said. That contract was your most viable path forward. Tell Holt his traps are getting predictable. Vance's jaw moved. Nothing came out. Eli walked out of the hotel into the October cold. He'd just refused $800 a month. He started doing the math and stopped himself. Because the math didn't change. They were still 200 toward 600, still 49 days out. Still needing to average $9 a day, he walked back to his horse. He'd refused $800 a month, and he'd do it again. He just wished it didn't make his stomach hurt quite so much. Kaya was standing at the cold forge when he got back. Not working. Just standing with one hand on the anvil, looking at nothing in particular. He'd never seen her do that. Stand idle in the smithy. He tied his horse and walked over. She didn't look at him right away. I nearly walked into the fire this morning, she said. He went still. Cormac's nephew pulled me back, she said. I didn't see it. I was so tired I didn't see the fire. He said nothing. Let her have the space to keep going or not. I'm going to make a mistake, she said. A real one. One that costs us everything. Or I'm going to get hurt. She stopped. I don't know how to stop. He looked at her hands. Resting on the anvil edge. Blistered. Calloused in new places over old calluses. The hands of someone who had been working past the point of sense for 30 days straight. Rest, he said. We can't. One day, Eli. One full day. You sleep. You don't go near the forge. We lose one day of production and we find another way to make it up. She looked at him with frustration of a person who knows you're right and doesn't want you to be right. We don't have days to spare. We don't have you to spare, he said it quietly. Like it was just practical. Like it wasn't also something else. She went quiet. He made himself say the rest. If you collapse, we lose everything anyway. If you hurt yourself in that forge, we lose everything anyway. One day of rest is not the thing that kills us. You breaking is. She looked at her hands. One day, she said finally, one day, and then we go back to work. She stood straight, looked at the cabin. Then at him. You're infuriating, she said. I've been told you're also right. I've been told that less. She almost smiled, went inside. He stood in the yard alone and let out a breath he'd been holding since he'd come through the gate. That night, Cormac sat with Eli by the fire outside. Wren was there too. They'd started doing this, gathering in the evenings. The way people do when they're bound up in something together and the company of others makes it feel less impossible. She's going to work herself to death, Wren said. I know, so what are you going to do about it? I told her to rest. She agreed for today, and tomorrow she'll be back in that smithy before dawn. Wren looked at him with that direct Lakota steadiness that didn't leave room for comfortable lies. She's not doing it for the money anymore, Eli. She hasn't been doing it for the money for a while. He said nothing. She's doing it because she's never been worth more than $2 to anyone, and she is determined to prove that wrong. Every hammer strike. Wren's voice was matter-of-fact. Not unkind. Just true. That's a hard engine to slow down. Cormac poked the fire. He said, before she died. She told me love isn't what happens in the easy days. It's what happens when everything is broken, and you find out who stays. He looked at Eli. You know who's staying. Ellie looked at the cabin, at the window where the lamp still burned. She hadn't gone to sleep yet, probably lying awake calculating, doing the math he'd asked her to stop doing. For one night, I need to tell her, Eli said. Not to anyone in particular. Yes, Wren said. You do, and if she doesn't, she does. Wren stood. That's the other thing that woman is working so hard, not to say out loud. She walked off into the dark. Cormac sat with Eli a while longer, not talking, just there. The way old friends sit, comfortable in the quiet, not needing to fill it. Eventually Eli went inside. Kaya was asleep. He could hear it, the deep, even breathing of someone who had finally let go. He stood in the main room in the dark and listened to it. Then he lay down on his floor, which was where he always slept, and stared at the ceiling, and thought about what he needed to say to her, and whether he was brave enough to say it. He was not sure he was brave enough. He was going to say it anyway. Day 55. $300 in the jar. They were going to make it. Actually, genuinely, mathematically going to make it. At their current rate, with the new orders from Silver Creek and the second mining camp to the east that had started sending requests. Eli woke up that morning and did the math and felt something so unfamiliar it took him a moment to identify it. Relief, actual bodily relief. The kind that loosens muscles you didn't know you'd been holding tight for 49 days. He made coffee. He was almost smiling when Kaya came out. "What?" she said. "Do the math," he said. She looked at the jar. Did the math. He watched her face. She went still. "We're gonna make it," she said, like she was testing this for words. "Wait, if nothing goes wrong," he said. But yes, she picked up her coffee cup, both hands. Looked at the jar. "Don't jinx it," she said. "I'm not jinxing anything. You said it out loud. Saying a true thing out loud isn't." "Eli, Kaya, don't," he laughed. He was laughing. Couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed at something that wasn't bleak. She looked at him like he was strange. And then something happened at the corner of her mouth. And she looked away, and that was all, but it was enough. They went to work. Day 60. Morning, clear sky. Cold. Ellie was in the yard when he heard it. The sound was wrong. A heavy wrong. Stone on stone, the grinding fall of something that was never supposed to move. Then Kaya's voice. Not a scream. She didn't scream. Just his name. Eli. He was already running. The smithy chimney had failed. Not cracked. Not shifted. Failed completely. The top section had come down into the forge, pulling the chimney with it, brick and mortar into the firebox, into the forge itself. The new structure built 40 days ago with hands and hope and good intentions, and not quite enough time checking the mortar under the inner lining. Clopsed. He hit the doorway, and there was dust and settling brick and heat still coming off the coals, and Kaya against the far wall, standing, not under the fall, barely not under the fall. He crossed the room in 4 steps and put his hands on her shoulders and looked at her. "Are you?" "I'm fine." She was looking past him, at the forge, at the collapsed chimney, at the ruin of what they'd built. "Kaya, I'm fine," she said again, her voice steady. "Look." He turned and looked. The forge was gone. Not damaged, gone. The firebox crushed under the weight of the chimney, the bellows torn. The chimney itself, a pile of rubble across the center of the smithy. The anvil, solid iron, had survived. The tools along the side wall. But the heart of the operation, the thing that made heat, that made everything else possible, died. He stood and looked at it. Kaya was beside him. They stood together in the settling dust. "How much time?" she said, flat. Like she was asking about weather. 7 days until Holt's deadline, she nodded. "We have $400. Yes, we need 6. Yes, we cannot rebuild the forge in 7 days. No." She walked forward into the rubble. Stood in the middle of what had been their operation. Looked at the crushed firebox. At the bricks. At the dust still moving in the light, coming through the open door. He waited. She turned back to face him. "The goats," she said. He had known this was coming. Had felt it forming in the back of his mind since he'd run in here. Had been hoping he was wrong. "All of them," he said. "Silver Creek. Emergency sale. Whatever we can get, Kaya." "Those goats are our income after we pay Holt. If we sell them all, we have nothing to. If we don't sell them, we don't pay Holt, and it doesn't matter what income we have, because we won't have land to graze them on." He looked at her. She looked back. He said, "We bet what's left," she said. "One more time. And if Silver Creek doesn't give us enough, Then we come home, and we stand here, and we tell Holt to his fate. We tried everything, he said without drama, without surrender. Like a woman who had made peace with an outcome and was not going to let the making of peace look like giving up. He nodded. I'll start rounding them up. That evening, Cormac came to help without being asked. Just showed up with his horse and his rope and started working. That was Cormac. The man communicated in showing up. Wren arrived an hour later. She looked at the smithy, said nothing. Found Eli, $20, she said. I have it saved, Wren. Don't. It's not. I said, don't. She pushed the money at him. We're past the part where you refuse help. Doyle Kane came at dark. His wife was on her feet now. Not healed, but standing, eating, improving. He came to stand guard through the night, which he did for the next 3 nights without anyone asking him to. Henterline calms. Silas Pruitt brought $10 and said, that's all I got, and it was true. $47 from 3 people who didn't have much to spare. Added to 400. 447. 153, short of 600. Still we go tomorrow, Eli told Cormac. Drive the herd to Silver Creek. 2 days there. Sell. Come back. Be here before Holt's noon deadline on day 90. Cutting it close. Not a lot of options left, Cormac nodded. I'll be ready at first light. That night, Eli went looking for Kaya and found her outside at the cold forge, not sitting, standing. Her hand on the stone wall of the new smithy, the one the community had built, the one now partially ruined again. Just standing there, with her palm flat against the stone like she was checking if it was still real. He came to stand beside her. Didn't speak right away. The Montana dark was complete out here. No town lights, no neighboring farms close enough to matter. Just stars so thick, they looked like something you could reach up and get your hand into. I've been trying to figure out what to say to you, he said. She didn't answer. Waiting. I've been trying since the barn raising. Since you stood up straight and danced badly with me, you danced badly. We both danced badly. She was quiet. I'm going to say something, he said. And I'm going to say it now because I'm writing out in the morning, and I don't know how this ends. And I don't want to not have said it. She turned to look at him. I love you, he said it straight. No dressing up, no building to it. Not because you saved my ranch. Not because you rebuilt my forge. Not because you can do things I can't and thought of things I wouldn't have thought of. He looked at her directly. Because you stood up straight, in that hall, after everything, and you're still standing. The stars were out. The night was cold. She looked at him for a long time. I don't know how to do this, she said finally. I have never been. She stopped. No one has ever. I know, I don't know how, neither do I, he meant it. I lost my wife. I lost my confidence. I spent 3 years talking to goats and trying not to notice how quiet it was. She looked away. Looked at the stars. I love you too, she said, quiet. Like she was testing the weight of each word before she set it down. I think I did before I understood what I was feeling. I think I did. When you put those $2 on the table and didn't look away, he felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. The warmth of being seen by someone who doesn't see easily. Come back, she said. I'm coming back. With enough money to pay Holt. That too, Eli. She looked at him. Come back I will, he said. I promise. They stood together for a while longer, not touching, just there. The cold around them, and the stars above them, and everything that hadn't been resolved yet, and also everything that had. First light. He was up before the sun. Biscuits made. Coffee hot. Kaya was already awake, had been, probably. She stood at the window when he came in from the kitchen side, looking at the smithy ruins in the pre-dawn dark. She turned when he set the plate down. Sat. Ate. They didn't talk, not much left to say that hadn't been said. When he was ready to go, coat on, rope over his shoulder, Cormac already visible at the gate working the first goats into line. She walked out with him. He'd stopped. She looked at him. He took her hand. Held it for 1 second. Then let go. 4 days, he said. I'll be here. He went to work the goats. At the gate he looked back once. She was still standing in the yard, arms at her sides, full height, not watching him go with worry on her face, just watching. Steady, like a woman who had decided something and wasn't taking it back, he turned forward. 38 goats, 20 miles, 2 days there, and whatever Silver Creek would give him. Enough. Had to be enough. He drove them north into the dark. Silver Creek, the livestock buyer's name, was Garrett. Hard man, 50 years old, and built like a man who had never once second-guessed himself. He walked through the herd with his hands in his pockets, and his eyes doing arithmetic, and his face giving nothing away. 38 goats, 8 years of Eli's life. Each one with a name, each one with a personality. He knew the way you know things you've spent years next to. Old Bessie, first goat he'd ever bought. Stubborn as iron and a good mother. Buck. Ornery and protective and always the first to sound off when something came too close to the fence. Clementine, Kaya's favorite. The one that followed her around the yard like a dog. The one that had figured out how to open the pen latch and had been letting herself out every third morning for 6 weeks, stood, watched Garrett walk through them. Did not think about Clementine. Garrett came back. Looked at Eli. Did the thing men like Garrett do where they make you wait just long enough to feel the weight. $40 for the lot, he said. Eli heard the number, heard it land. Felt it land somewhere in his chest like a stone dropped into deep water. The impact, then the silence, then the slow cold spread of it. 40, he said. Market soft. Got 3 other sellers this week. Garrett shrugged. The shrug of a man who had nothing at stake. 40's my number. Ellie looked at Cormac. Cormac looked back. His face said what his mouth didn't. $40. Added to 447. 487 total. $113 short. 113. Aha, 100, Eli said. I'll take 100. They're worth twice that. Worth and price aren't the same thing. 80. 40. Garrett, I'm not running a charity, Graves. You want to find another buyer, you're welcome to try. He gestured at the cattle yard around them. But it'll take you another day, and you look like a man who doesn't have another day. He wasn't wrong. He was exactly right, and Eli hated him for it. 40, Eli said finally. Quietly, Garrett counted out the bills. Fast and efficient. Transferred them to Eli's hand. Led the goats away without ceremony. Just like that, gone 8 years of work. Walking away with a man who hadn't even asked their names. Eli stood in the cattle yard with $40 in his hand, and the math doing itself in his head, whether he wanted it to or not. 487, 113 short. 3 days until Holt's deadline, including 2 days to ride back. No forge, no herd, no income. No way to make $113 with nothing left to sell. Cormac put a hand on his shoulder. Didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say. Because sometimes a hand on the shoulder is the only honest thing. They rode home through the night. They made it back in 3 days exactly. Pliffed the horses, barely slept. 8 in the saddle. Kaya was in the yard when they came through the gate, at dawn on day 88. She'd been watching for them. He could tell by the way she was standing. Not sitting. Not doing anything. Just standing in the yard in the cold morning, dark, facing the road. She looked at his face, one look. That was all she needed. How much? 40? Total? 487. She was quiet for a moment. 113 short, she said. Yes, she nodded. Like she was accepting a weather report, deciding how to dress for it. When does Holt come? Noon. Day 90, 2 days. She looked at the ruined smithy, at the cabin, at the goat pen standing empty and pointless. At all of it, we can't make $113 in 2 days, she said. No, we already have everyone's help. There's no more to ask for. No, so, he said. We're here when he comes. We stand here. And we tell him to his face that we tried. She looked at him. That's it? That's it. A long pause. All right. Not defeat. Not surrender. Just the steadiness of a person who has decided that dignity doesn't require winning. Just requires showing up. She went inside. He stood in the yard alone for a minute. Then he followed her. They spent the next 2 days doing the work that was left to do. Not giving up. Not exactly. Just doing the ordinary things. He caught himself reaching for the feed bucket for goats that weren't there. Force of habit. He set it back down. Kaya cleaned the smithy, cleared the fallen brick, sorted the tools that had survived into careful piles. Not because they'd need them, just because leaving it in chaos felt like a concession she wasn't willing to make. Ren came by on day 89. Sat with Kaya in the yard for an hour. He stayed on the other side of the cabin and let them have it. Cormac came that evening. Brought food, beans and cornbread, and a jar of something preserved. Sat at the table and ate with them and talked about nothing important. The coming winter, the state of the northern pastures, the new preacher in town, who couldn't hold a candle to the old one, normal things. The things you talk about when you're trying to give people the gift of one ordinary evening before something hard. After Cormac left, Eli and Kaya sat by the fire. She was looking at the $2 he'd set on the table. He'd taken them out of the box he kept in the bedroom, the small cedar box where he kept important things. He didn't know why he'd taken them out. Just wanted them where he could see them. "Tell me about your father," she said suddenly. He looked at her. "Mine or yours?" "Mine." A pause. "I don't know enough about him. I know he was a blacksmith. I know he left when I was young. I know he didn't come back." She looked at the fire. "I used to think he chose to leave. That he left us because staying was too hard." She was quiet. "I don't think that anymore," she said. "I don't know why. I just don't." Ellie said nothing. Let her have the thought. She picked up one of the silver dollars. "Turned it over, my mother said he went north," she said. "To find work. That's all she ever told me. He went north and he didn't come back." She set the coin down. "Maybe he tried," she said. "Maybe he tried to come back and couldn't. Maybe he made something. Maybe he was trying to make something for us and it just didn't work out the way he planned." She looked up at Eli. "People try," she said, "even when it doesn't look like it from outside." "People try," he nodded. "They do," he said. She picked up both silver dollars, held them in her palm. Looked at them. "Best investment you ever made," she said. Dry. Almost a smile. "By a considerable margin," she handed them back. He held them in his fist, cold and flat and real. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she agreed. Noon. Day 90. Warren Holt rode up with 6 men, all armed, all sitting their horses with the ease of men who expected no resistance. Holt himself was in his good suit, like he'd dressed for an occasion. Like this was something to celebrate. He dismounted slow, looked around the yard, at the empty goat pen, the ruined smithy, the cabin, the 2 people standing in front of it. He smiled. "Graves," he said pleasantly. "Mrs. Graves." Ellie said nothing. "I assume by the lack of an envelope that you don't have my money." 487, Eli said. "That's what we have. 487. Holt said it like he was tasting it. "That is, let me think. $113 short." He reached into his coat, produced the lease document, unfolded it with care, which means as of this moment, the land, the cabin, and all structures thereon revert to my ownership. You have until sunset to remove your personal belongings." He looked around the yard with the eyes of a man already deciding what he'd do with a place once he owned it. "I'll give you fair warning. I'll have a logging crew here by next week. That north slope timber won't cut itself." He started to fold the document. Ali looked at Kaya. She was looking at the cabin door. He followed her look. She was staring at something. Not the door. Past it. Through it. To the bedroom, maybe. To something inside she'd been thinking about. Her face had gone very still. "There's something in the cabin I need to get," she said. Holt waved a hand. "By all means." Sunset, she went inside. He heard her moving. The sound of the bedroom. The old dresser. The one with the bottom drawer that had stuck since he'd first moved in. The one he'd never been able to pull out. More than halfway, he kept his eyes on Holt. Holt kept smiling. And then, A horse on the road, Cummings, fast. Edmund Clark rode like a man who knew exactly where he needed to be and was not going to be late getting there. 40 years old. Lean. Clean-shaven. He wore a coat with a badge on it. Some territorial authority insignia that Eli recognized vaguely as belonging to the land office. He pulled up in the yard, looked at the assembled scene, at Holt and his 6 men, at Eli, at the lease document in Holt's hand, Warren Holt. He said. Holt turned. His smile flickered just slightly, like a candle in a door that opened wrong. And you are Edmund Clark, Territorial Land Office. He dismounted, reached into his coat. I've been wanting to speak with you for several weeks. You've been difficult to locate at your home property. I've been busy, Holt said. Careful now. Watchful. The smile thinned down to almost nothing, I imagine. Clark looked at Eli. Is Mrs. Graves present? Eli turned. Kaya was standing in the cabin doorway. She was holding something, a piece of paper, old, the edges browned with age. She was looking at it, with an expression he couldn't read at first. Something between confusion and recognition, and something deeper than either. I found this, she said. Her voice was different. Not the controlled, steady voice she used for everything. Something underneath was moving in it. In the bedroom, she said. In the bottom of the old dresser, the drawer that always stuck. I finally got it. All the way out. She walked forward, held out the paper to Clark. He looked at it. And something happened in his face that was not surprise. It was the face of a man who has been looking for something and has just been handed it by the situation itself. Where did you get this? Clark said. The dresser, Kaya said. It was under the drawer. Tucked flat against the bottom of the frame, this cabin was the residence of the original homesteader, Clark said. He looked at Holt. Before Mrs. Agnes Crane sold the deed to you. Holt said nothing. The original homesteader filed this claim. In 1867, Clark continued. He turned to Kaya. His name was Thomas Runningwater. The yard went quiet. Eli looked at Kaya. She was very still. Runningwater, she said, barely above a whisper. Apache blacksmith. Filed a proper homestead claim on this property in the spring of 1867. Resided here for 3 years, meeting all requirements under the Homestead Act. His claim was legitimate and complete. Clark looked at the paper Kaya had just pulled from under a stuck dresser drawer, and then at Holt. When he died in 1870, the land should have passed to his legal heir, not reverted to the territory, and certainly not to Agnes Crane, who had no legal claim whatsoever, and who forged the transfer documentation. Holt's jaw moved. I purchased that deed in good faith. You purchased a fraudulent document, Clark said. That's between you and Mrs. Crane, but the land was never hers to sell, which means it was never yours to buy. Which means, he turned to Kaya, Mrs. Graves. Your full name? She straightened. Kaya Runningwater Graves, and Thomas Runningwater was your father. A pause. One single breath of a pause. Yes, she said. Clark opened his briefcase, produced another document, thick, official. The kind of paper that had weight to it. Then this property has belonged to you since 1870, he said. You simply didn't know it. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't happen often. The kind where even the wind seems to stop. Ellie looked at Kaya. She was reading the document Clark had handed her. Reading it with both hands wrapped around it, and the stillness of someone whose world has just rearranged itself at the foundation. And they're still catching up to what that means. Her father, Thomas Runningwater, had come here, to this land, to this specific patch of Montana, had filed a claim, had built the smithy, the one she'd recognized when she first saw it, the one she'd touched like something familiar. The one she'd rebuilt with her own hands, not knowing she was finishing what her father had started. Eli felt something move in his chest. Something large and wordless. He went north, she'd said by the fire. He didn't come back. He'd gone north. He'd come here. He'd built something. And then he'd died. A mining accident in Silver Creek, Clark's documents confirmed. Killed in the same camp that had been buying Kaya's work for the past 2 months. before he could go back for her, before he could tell her, before he could do any of the things he must have intended to do. He'd died with the land in his name, and his daughter's name unrecorded, and a deed that sat waiting for someone to claim it for 13 years. And then the someone had arrived, brought by a broke man's impulse, and $2 silver, and whatever force arranges these things. Holt was saying something, his lawyer's voice, the language of men who have done something wrong, and know it, and are buying time with words. Ely stopped listening. He was watching Kaya. She'd finished reading the document, was holding it with both hands, eyes up, looking at something past the yard, past the hills, past the October sky. Her father had built this smithy, the anvil she'd touched the first day she arrived. Her father's anvil, the fire she'd lit, his fire pit, rebuilt by her own hands, the work she'd been doing for 2 months, his work, his trade, his hands in hers through the years of learning. She hadn't known, but something in her had known. Clark was done talking. Holt was done talking too, though not by choice. His lawyer had said something quietly in his ear, and Holt's face had gone the particular gray of a man who has just understood that he has lost. "The deed is void," Clark said. "The lease agreement Mr. Holt imposed on Mr. Graves is void. The claim he has been pursuing on this property is without legal foundation. This land belongs to Kaya Running Water Graves and has since 1870. He looked at Holt. "You'll want to speak with your lawyer about Agnes Crane. That's a separate matter. But I'll be filing my report with the territorial court by end of week, and there will be additional investigation into other land transactions you've conducted in this area." One of Holt's men shifted in his saddle. Holt himself was very still. He was doing the arithmetic. Ely could see it happening. The calculation of a man assessing what he could salvage and what he couldn't. "I paid for that deed," Holt said. Flat. "The pleasant surface all the way gone. Then you were defrauded," Clark said. "As I said, take it up with Mrs. Crane." Holt looked at Ely, then at Kaya. The look of a man who has been beaten and is deciding whether to acknowledge it or waste more time pretending otherwise. He decided not to waste the time. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," Kaya said. "Certain." Not angry, not triumphant, just true. Holt held her gaze for 1 second, then 2, then he remounted and rode out. His 6 men followed. Nobody looked back. Just like that, gone. The yard was very quiet. Clark stayed long enough to go through the paperwork, to explain what needed to be filed and where and by when, to answer Eli's questions, which were practical and specific, because Ely was still the kind of man who dealt with shock by asking practical questions. When Clark was done, he shook Eli's hand. "Then Kaya's, there's one more thing," he said. He reached into his briefcase again, produced a small box, wood, dark with age, brass clasp gone green. "When Thomas Runningwater died in Silver Creek," he said carefully, "his personal effects were kept by the camp manager, standard practice. In case family came forward, he held out the box. No one came. It was transferred to the land office records. It's been there for 3 years." Kaya looked at the box. Clark set it on the fence post between them. "It's yours," he said. He mounted his horse, rode out the gate, down the road, leaving Ely and Kaya standing alone in the yard, the box on the fence post. She didn't move toward it right away, stood looking at it for a moment. The way you look at a door you're not sure you're ready to open. Ely stood beside her, not speaking, not moving, just there. She stepped forward, lifted the lid inside. 2 things, a hammer, small, the kind of hammer a man makes for teaching, sized for a child's hands, the grip worn smooth from years of use. The head was good iron, well made. The handle had something carved into it, letters. Small and careful, cut with a tool, not a knife. The work of someone who knew how to shape things precisely, her name. In Apache script, the marks she recognized from her mother, from the old way of writing that most people around here had never seen. Her name, carved into the handle by hands that knew how to work with permanence, her father's hands, and under the hammer, folded small, a piece of paper, A letter. She picked it up, unfolded it. Ellie watched her read. He watched her face while she read, and he would have looked away to give her privacy, except he couldn't. Watching her face was like watching something break open that had been closed for a very long time, and the breaking was not ugly. It was necessary. It was the opening of something that needed air. She read it twice. Then she held it with both hands, arms down at her sides, like she was letting it breathe. He wrote it in English, she said. Her voice was different, not the controlled, steady voice, something younger in it. His handwriting, it's careful. Like he was learning. She looked at the letter. He says he's been practicing, so I could read it when I got here. Ellie said nothing, he says. She stopped. Steadied. He says he's building a smithy, a real one, not a borrowed forge, one that's us ours. Her voice caught on the word ours. He says he'll come back when it's ready. He says, she stopped again. Longer this time, he says. I am building you a place where no one can tell you to leave, where you belong because the land is yours and no one can change that. I will come back for you. I promise. The yard was very quiet. Montana autumn all around them. The cold and the color and the enormous sky. He didn't come back, she said, quietly. No, Eli said, but he built it. Yes, he built it, and then I came here anyway, not knowing. And she looked at the smithy, at the rebuilt walls, the ruined chimneys still standing in its broken way. I rebuilt it. Not knowing I was finishing what he started, she held the small hammer in her hand. Her name in Apache script on the handle. He'd made it for her. Made it for a daughter he was going to teach. A daughter who was going to come here and learn the trade at a forge he'd built himself. A daughter who was going to have a place. A real place. Her own. He just ran out of time. Ellie felt his throat tighten in a way he was not going to be able to talk through if he tried. So he didn't try. After a while, Kaya looked at him. Her eyes were wet. She wasn't crying exactly. Or she was. But the way people cry who don't quite believe they're allowed to, so it comes out sideways, quiet. Just her eyes. He tried. She said. He did. He tried, and he ran out of time and he never got to tell me. No, and I spent breath. I spent years thinking he left because we weren't worth coming back for. Illy looked at her directly. He came here to make something worth coming back to, he said. That's not leaving. That's the opposite of leaving. She held the hammer and the letter, and for the first time since he'd known her, since that platform, since the bid, since the forge and the barn raising and the dance and all of it, she let herself cry without doing anything to stop it. He put his arm around her. She was taller than him. He had to reach up slightly. It didn't matter. She leaned into it. Just slightly. Just enough. They stood in the yard of the land that was hers, that had been waiting for her, that her father built and she'd come back to without knowing she was coming back. And Eli held on. 3 days later, they went to town. Not to confront Holt. That was Clark's business now. And the courts, and the process that grinds slow but doesn't stop. They went to register the deed in Kaya's name. The same building where the auction had been held. Different purpose now. A clerk and 2 witnesses and papers that said what was true. This land belongs to Kaya Running Water Graves. The deed transferred and recorded and real in the way that paper makes real. Wren was there, Cormac, Silas Pruitt, who shook Kaya's hand with both of his and didn't say anything, because sometimes a man's grip says it. Doyle Kane was there with his wife on his arm. She was pale and thin but upright, and she held Doyle's hand, and that was everything. When it was done, they stood outside, in the November cold. Wren said, "Now what?" Eli looked at Kaya. Kaya looked at him. "Now we build," she said. The second wedding happened 2 weeks later, outside. Not in a church, in the yard of the property, under a sky that had gone the deep blue of late November, the cold so clean it hurt, to breathe in a good way. Everyone came, the whole valley, more people than the barn raising. People who had heard and wanted to see it. People who had a stake in what this represented. A man and a woman who had been beaten down to their last $2 and their last thread, and had still refused to let go. Ellie had written his vows himself. He hadn't told her this. She found out when he started speaking. "I bought you for $2, he said, which was all I had. And I want you to know, I knew it wasn't enough. I knew $2 wasn't a fair price for a person's life. I knew it then." He looked at her, but I also knew, and I didn't have the words for it at the time. I also knew that whatever you were worth more than the silence in that room. And I wasn't going to let that silence be the last thing that happened. She was looking at him with the expression she had sometimes when she'd decided something and was waiting for the right moment to say it. "So I want to make a different promise now. Not the one from the contract, a real one." He held out both hands. "I promise to stay through the bad math and the broken forges and the winters that don't care if you're ready. I promise to be standing when you look for me, and I promise that $2 was the best money I ever spent." She took his hands. "My father built this land for me," she said. "He didn't know he was building it for you too. But I think," she paused, "I think he'll be glad. I think he would look at you and see a man who knows what things are worth. Not what they cost. What they're worth." She squeezed his hands. "I promise to stay. I promise to keep building. And I promise that I will always be standing." Cormac was crying. He would deny this later. He was absolutely crying. Wren was not crying. She was doing the expression of a woman who has decided crying is for other people, but whose eyes were doing something wet and involuntary. Doyle Kane was openly weeping and didn't appear to care at all. The officiant said the words, the legal words, the binding ones. And when it was done, Eli reached into his coat pocket and took out the $2 he'd been carrying them since morning. He placed them in Kaya's palm. She looked down at them. "I've been thinking about what to do with these," he said. "I thought about keeping them, framing them, making some kind of—" "No," she said. "No. Come with me." She walked, still holding his hand, still in her good dress, still in the November cold, across the yard to the smithy, to the ruined chimney that they hadn't yet rebuilt. She found 2 loose bricks near the base. She set the $2 on the mortar bed, one each, then she set the bricks over them. "Into the foundation. When we rebuild," she said, "they'll be in there." In the foundation, she looked at him, not framed, not kept. Built into it. He looked at the foundation, at the bricks, at the place where the coins were now part of the structure. "My father built this place," she said, "and now we're building it again. And those $2 are part of what it's built on." She picked up a loose piece of mortar, pressed it around the bricks. "Set, there," she said. He looked at the foundation, then at her. "Best investment I ever made," he said. "Best investment anyone ever made." She said back, and she smiled. That real smile, the full one. The one that changed her whole face, and that he had been chasing since the first time. He'd seen it on a barn dance floor where they were both dancing badly. He kissed her. Behind them, the valley cheered. 2 years later, spring of 1875, the forge was rebuilt. Better than before. Better than either version that had come before. Proper stone. Proper chimney. Reinforced foundation. Eli had checked every inch of the mortar himself 3 times before they lit the first fire. Wide enough that Kaya moved through it without adjusting. Ventilated right. Built to last. She had 2 apprentices now. Young men, one from Silver Creek. One Cormac's nephew, who had decided hauling was less interesting than making. She taught them the way her father had taught her. Starting with the simple things. Starting with fire. Came from 3 territories. Picks. Shovels. Specialty tools for the mining. Engineers who had started here at the forge at the Graves place. Blacksmith who made things that didn't break. The cabin had 2 new rooms. A proper kitchen. A bedroom that fit the bed Eli had built. Bigger than the old one. Big enough. The goat herd was coming back. Small yet. 6 animals. But growing Ellie had learned to work the bellows properly, had learned to sort the coal, had learned to recognize by the color of heated iron what temperature it was and what it wanted to do. He was not a blacksmith. not close. But he was useful in the forge, and she'd stopped having to ask twice for things. And that was its own kind of competence. The small hammer, her name in Apache, script on the handle, hung on the wall of the forge. The place of honor, center wall, where you'd see it first thing when you came through the door, her father's hammer, her name in his hand. Every morning, when she lit the fire, she looked at it. He had seen her do this every day for 2 years. She didn't know he'd seen her. He'd never said anything about it. It was hers. That moment was hers. The boy was born in November. Cold month. Snow on the ground. The midwife from town had been and gone, and Wren had stayed through the night, and by morning there was a child. Illy held him for the first time, and felt something happen to his understanding of what he was capable of feeling. Big. Already big. Which Wren said with a meaningful look at Kaya, who said nothing, but the corner of her mouth moved dark hair. Eyes that were going to settle into something. It was too early to know what. Name, Kaya said. She was tired. The tired of someone who has done something enormous and is still in the presence of it. Ellie looked at the boy. He looked at Kaya. Thomas, he said. She went still. Thomas Eli Graves, he said. A long pause. She reached out. Took the boy back. Held him against her chest. Looked at his face. Thomas, she said softly. Testing it. Giving it to the room. Thomas Eli Graves. She looked at Eli. Her eyes were doing the wet, sideways thing again. He would have liked that, she said. My father. He would have liked knowing there was another Thomas who came from his land. His land, Eli said. Our land, she agreed. Outside, the snow was coming down. Montana November, which did not ask permission and did not apologize. The valley white and still, and going quiet the way it did when the snow came in earnest. Inside, fire in the hearth. A woman and a man, and a boy named Thomas Eli Graves, and on the wall of the forge next door, a small hammer with a name carved into the handle. A name her father had carved with hands that knew how to make things last. On the morning Thomas was 3 weeks old, Eli walked into the forge alone, early. Before Kaya was up, before the apprentices arrived, before any of it. He stood in the middle of the forge and looked at the wall, at the hammer. He thought about a man named Thomas Runningwater who had come to Montana, with a skill and a plan and a daughter he was trying to build something for, who had built a smithy and filed a deed and written a letter he never got to send, who had died in a mining camp 20 miles away before any of it could land the way he'd intended. He thought about the way things arranged themselves. A man builds something, doesn't get to finish. Time passes. A woman comes, his daughter, not knowing, and finishes it without knowing she's finishing it. And in the middle, held in place by $2 silver in the foundation, is the moment it all turned, one bad impulse. Or a good one. Hard to say which. Both, maybe. $2 and a woman still standing. Eli picked up the bellows. Started working them, slow at first. Then finding the rhythm. The rhythm Kaya had shown him, the one her father had probably taught her, the one that moved heat from coal into air, into iron, into something that lasted. He built the fire. He heard Kaya moving in the cabin, the sound of her crossing the main room, the front door. She appeared in the smithy doorway, Thomas in her arms, looking at Eli with that expression, somewhere between amused and something more than amused. You're doing it wrong, she said. I'm doing it. The bellows. Too fast. I've been watching you do this for 2 years. Yes. And you're still doing it too fast. He looked at the bellows, at the fire, at her. Show me, he said. She shifted Thomas to one arm. The boy was awake, looking at the fire with the wide, serious attention of someone countering something brand new. She stepped forward, took the bellows handle with her free hand. Slow, steady. The rhythm she'd had from the first day. Like that, she said. I know, he said. I just wanted to watch. She looked at him sideways. He smiled. And the fire built, the way fires do when you work them right. Slow, steady. Building toward the heat you need to make things with. Not rushed, not forced, just tended. Outside, Montana winter was doing what Montana winter does. Absolute and enormous. and completely indifferent to the plans of people. Inside, the forge burned, and in the foundation, under 2 bricks in the south wall, 2 silver dollars sat in the mortar where they'd been placed on a November wedding day. Part of the structure, part of what the whole thing rested on, not framed, not kept, built in, the best investment anyone ever made.